Once again, good evening, everyone, for meeting number 2 for our Bible prophecy seminar. All of this is part of our efforts under Discover Truth, may I say brand or kind of ministry, where we try to share the gospel, the prophecies, the promises in the Holy Scriptures with everyone. We decided to have this Bible prophecy seminar focusing on biblical prophecies like the ones in the book of Daniel and the book of Revelation. If you missed our first presentation, it started with the first chapter in the book of Daniel, and tonight we'll move on to chapter 2 in this biblical book. And I'll start with the story that's right there in the lesson. It says that it was nearly midnight when a 16-year-old and his friend stepped out of the opera house in Linz, an Austrian city on the Danube River. The two guys, young guys, they've just watched a performance of Richard Wagner, Rienzi, the fairy tale of a poor boy in ancient Rome who became the ruler of a vast empire. Later on that night, they moved to a top of a hill, and from there they looked over Linz. And the guy in the bigger picture, maybe you start to recognize him, said to the other one, "Something important has happened to me tonight, Goslow. As I watched the story of Rienzi unfold, I seemed to be seeing my future. I too am a poor boy like Rienzi. I too will rise to become the ruler of a great empire. You'll hear much about me in the future," he said. The future of this world? The story, it's about a poor guy who becomes indeed an emperor in Rome. And this was somehow the goal of this young guy. Maybe you recognize him faster now. And you recognize also what followed and how he followed this dream, conquering a lot of Europe, moving west, moving south, moving east, trying to unite everyone under one rule in Germany. But the lesson says that Hitler probably never studied the prophecy of Daniel 2. Daniel, the biblical book in the Old Testament, because the lesson said if he had, he might have realized that his obsession with world dominance could never become a reality. What do we mean by that? The book of Daniel, it's one of the richest in the Bible regarding prophecies, regarding a timeline of empires, what is to come, and how this world will end. So in this book, in chapter 2, we find that in his second year of his reign, King Nebuchadnezzar had dreams. His mind was troubled and he could not sleep. That's how the chapter starts. Now, for a king to have nightmares probably is not something that we are so used to. We think that we, the poor guys, we have nightmares. But the king, come on, he has money, he has women, he has everything that he wants. And yet, this king, the greatest of the Babylonian Empire, had dreams and his mind was troubled and he could not sleep. If you just turn on the TV or open any newspaper today, you'll find out the discussions about what happens now in Russia and Ukraine and NATO and the countries around. My own country, Romania, is there on the map somehow. And there are invasion fears. So many soldiers or military arsenal and discussions and everything there. And you take a newspaper and you find there this a kind of title like this, "A Fight to the Death," and you wonder the death of whom. So you can somehow realize that All right, a guy like Nebuchadnezzar, like any president tonight, maybe they have a different kind of a sleep than others. And the Bible says that the king summoned the magicians, enchanters, sorcerers, and astrologers to tell him what he had dreamed. When they came in and stood before the king, he said to them, I have had a dream that troubles me, and I want to know what it means. All good, right? Up to here. The smart guys come to the king and say, tell your servants the dream, and we will interpret it. Sounds very well, right? You give us material, and we will sort it out for you. But the king is as smart or as worried because he says, tell me the dream and interpret it for me. The wise men say, once more they replied, let the king tell his servants the dream and we will interpret it. But this time the king is getting angry. The king answered, I'm certain that you are trying to gain time. If you do not tell me the dream, there is only one penalty for you, basically death, right? You have conspired to tell me misleading and weird things, hoping that the situation will change. So then tell me the dream and I will know that you can interpret it for me. I love Nebuchadnezzar here. Why? Because he doesn't play with his guys. I know he paid a lot of money to his high priests or sorcerers, magicians, or probably they were very smart and wise in all the things, but they were also playing with him here, saying, you give us a dream and we'll provide an interpretation. We'll supply one. And I'm sure everybody can do that. I mean, if you're really smart, if you're really powerful, why don't you really now tell me what's in my mind or what was in my mind last night? Nebuchadnezzar says plainly, tell me the dream and I will know that you can interpret. The astrologers answered the king, and I highlighted a few things here. You'll see them in orange. There is no one on earth who can do what the king asks. No king, however great and mighty, has ever asked such a thing of any magician or enchanter or astrologer. What the king asks is too difficult. No one can reveal it to the king except the gods, and they do not live among humans. I bet if you are Nebuchadnezzar, you say, by the way, what did you say you are doing? Are you in touch? Are you in any connection with the gods out there? They themselves should also sign their resignation right now because they admit they don't have such good or strong connections up there. They say no one can reveal it to the king except the gods. You know what happened? The king said, all right, kill them all. Right away, kill them all. It was in Babylon, ancient Babylon. There was no Amnesty International. There was no appeal or something else in there. The king decided, and that was it. But along with them would have been also Daniel and his friends. Now, since we do have the book of Daniel, it means that our loved hero, Daniel, survived, right? So let's see how he did it. He went to the king and said, King, give me time and I will bring you both the dream and the interpretation. You see, Daniel was smart. He didn't say, oh, you tell me the dream and I'll, no, that was a dead end already. But he said, give me time and I'll find it out. And during that night, he, along with his friends, went to a prayer meeting. They organized a prayer meeting in one of their chambers there, probably, and they prayed. And during the night, I don't know if Nebuchadnezzar slept on that night or not, but Daniel had a special dream. And during that dream, he got copy-paste all the dream of Nebuchadnezzar and also the interpretation. And in one of the verses there in the book, in chapter 2, he says, and that's like the highlight, the takeaway of the entire dream: God changes times and seasons. He deposes kings and raises up others. Please, can you already see what is going on or what is going to happen soon? It's that kind of interpretation where Nebuchadnezzar says like, oh, so I'm the king and there will be another king and then another king. And this is something that Biden doesn't want to hear. Putin doesn't want to hear. Trump doesn't want to hear. No king wants to hear that there will be another one coming in. But Daniel is so clear on this one. God changes times and seasons, and he moves in or out the kings. So imagine the young guy going now in front of Nebuchadnezzar. While I like this picture because one of the guys there is still checking his maps, another one his crystal globe, they are trying all their things, but Daniel says, hey, I go to the king. The king, says the Bible, the king asked Daniel, are you able to tell me what I saw in my dream and interpret it? And guess what? Daniel replied, Your Majesty, no wise man, enchanter, magician, or diviner can explain to the king the mystery he has asked about. But there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries. He has shown King Nebuchadnezzar what will happen in the days to come. Can you see another hint here? It's not only about kings, it's also about events, things to happen in the future. We could say, welcome to prophecy, right? And Daniel starts saying, as your majesty was lying there, your mind turned to things to come. Once again, it's all about the future. It's what is to come. And he continues saying that the revealer of mysteries, that is God, showed you what is going to happen. I think that by now you have seen 3 or 4 times. It's all about what is to come. In other words, yes, thank you for being here with us. Welcome to the Bible prophecy. This is Bible prophecy. It's not what is in my mind or what I dreamed last night or something like that, but it's the real, the sure word of prophecy. If you ever checked our website, discovertruth.ie, you have seen this image. It was there in a big slide. And maybe you also noticed some of our flyers or the roll-up banner, wherever you met any of our groups, and we are now being scattered all over Ireland almost. You have seen this kind of picture. This is, of course, the artist illustration of the dream. And I'll present now in the words of Daniel, but with this image, step by step, what Daniel presented to King Nebuchadnezzar. You, O king, now is Daniel talking, right? You, O king, were watching. And behold, a great image. This great image, whose splendor was excellent, stood before you, and its form was awesome. This image head was of fine gold. Its chest and arms were of silver. Its belly and thighs of bronze. Its legs of iron. Its feet partly of iron and partly of clay. Of course, this is a very strange statue, right? If you think like, oh, is this really? Please look at the images on the screen. These are real statues from ancient Babylon. This is how they represented their gods. You see God Marduk in the middle, and you see on the right Nabu. Even Nabucodonosor or Nebuchadnezzar was a son of God Marduk. This is how they represented their gods. On the right side, you can see a big statue, right, in a museum. To have a statue was like a symbol of a king, of a kingdom, of a god that is protecting that land or that empire. So it was something very, very easy for Nebuchadnezzar to grasp. In other words, God himself is talking to Nebuchadnezzar not in Chinese, not in Hebrew, not in English, but he's talking to him in that kind of images, illustrations, symbols that Nebuchadnezzar can understand. So we might say, okay, but how come that he forgets? I mean, come on, it's an image, right? It's a statue. How would you forget such a dream? Probably there were some things in there that Nebuchadnezzar didn't want to grasp right away or struggled with that. I mean, to have a statue that is not stone only or gold only or any, I don't know, diamonds or something else in there, but to have a mixture, that is very strange. So Daniel just presented him the dream, and now there is a disturbing part into it. Daniel says, you king, you watched until, or while a stone was cut out without hands, which struck the image on its feet of iron and clay and broke them in pieces. Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold were crushed together and became like chaff from the summer threshing floors. The wind carried them away so that no trace of them was found. All right, now is the disturbing kind of a dream, right? And the stone that struck the image became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. What is this? Or what is this all about, right? The king asked Daniel, you remember, are you able to tell me what I saw in my dream? Yes, of course. Daniel just presented it. But the second part of Nebuchadnezzar's question was, can you also interpret it for me? And Daniel here gives credit to God. Says there's a revealer of mysteries, and now says this was the dream, and now we will interpret it to the king. I'm stopping here just for a few seconds to highlight one very important thing. What is to follow is not my thoughts, is not some ideas that the author of the lessons just put there in the lesson. This is the interpretation given by Daniel. So let's go. You remember he said this image's head was of fine gold. Now, when he interprets it to the king, he says, you, O king, are king of kings. For the God of heaven has made you ruler of all these. You are this head of gold. Please, if we were in a classroom and myself as a teacher would ask now the students, who was the head of gold? I'm sure with pointing out to this verse, you'll say Babylon or Nebuchadnezzar, but we talk now about the king and his kingdom. The empire of Babylon is the head of gold. And just to apply now into history, we would say, Daniel, what you mentioned to Nebuchadnezzar, history confirmed later. And when we look back into any encyclopedia, you'll find out that Babylon ruled the world from 605 to 539 BC. And if you want to know how Babylon reached its end, continue reading Daniel, and you'll find the fall of Babylon in chapter 5. So the head of gold, it's clearly, unmistakably, Babylon. Now, what is to follow? The second part or second section of the statue was arms and chest of silver. Now, silver is inferior to gold, right? Everybody knows that. And Daniel says to the king, but after you, you are the head of gold, but after you shall arise another kingdom inferior to yours. I think you can see the paradox here. How can an inferior one conquer a superior one? But this is how God works many times. And don't forget, he is the one changing the times and the season. He deposes kings, he instates kings. And it says here very plainly, another kingdom. As I said, if you just read chapter 5 in the book of Daniel, you'll find that the Medes and the Persians, or the kingdom of Medo-Persia, conquered Babylon and ruled the world from 539 to 331 before Christ. This is plain history. You can check it anywhere. What's the third segment of the statue? You remember its belly and thighs of bronze? Daniel interprets it saying, a third kingdom of bronze will come, which shall rule over all the earth. If a student just goes to an encyclopedia and looks, okay, who conquered Medo-Persia, or who ruled the world as a third empire, we'll find out about Alexander the Great, Macedonian Empire, or we call it simply Greece. Greece dominated the world from 331 to 168 BC. But the statue has another segment, the legs of iron. I hope you can see gold, silver, going down, bronze, and now we go to iron. Now, gold is made for jewelry. Silver, silver for coins, let's say, is still valuable. Bronze will be mostly for different utensils or armory. But now iron is really weaponry, is really for hard stuff. And interestingly enough, Daniel says, and the fourth kingdom shall be as strong as iron. And like iron that crushes, that kingdom will break in pieces and crush all the others. Now, if I'm asking, what was the fourth kingdom? You may remember even Jesus Christ was crucified under the rulership of Rome. Rome really ruled the world from 168 BC to now Anno Domini, after Christ, 476. These are centuries of world dominance. But what happens now is that this fourth kingdom is not being replaced by another. There is no fifth kingdom in the statue, but this fourth kingdom is being transformed into something else. You remember, its feet were part of iron and part of clay. Now, everybody knows that a statue cannot stand if its foundation is such a mixture of strong things and weak things. You cannot have like a, the story with an elephant, but having so fragile some legs or feet there. So this statue is rather strange. What about the feet? Part of iron and part of clay. Do you remember? Is the same part, the physical part of the body, right? The legs going all the way down, but now iron and clay. And Daniel says, King, you saw the feet and toes, partly of potter's clay and partly of iron. The kingdom shall be divided. All right, that's the key. It shall be partly strong and partly fragile. We would call this a Rome transformed, and will rule the world from 476 all the way to the end. Please, there is no fifth empire. There is only division, as you can see here. Strong and weak. Iron and clay. Division. There is not going to be a strong union in there where like an empire. No, it will not be such a thing. Please, once again, this is not another empire conquering Rome, but it's Rome being transformed into something else. And if you turn to any historical book, you'll find, or any history book, you'll find it there that at 476, Rome fell under the invasion of some barbaric tribes, which now, interestingly enough, form our European kind of union. I say kind of union because it's union in some parts, like in traveling or some legislations, but it's still divided. You just have to look at Brexit, just have to look at any hot issue that is being so vividly debated in the European Council or Parliament and so on. But the story doesn't end here, if you remember. Daniel said to the king, you watched while a stone just broke everything in pieces. So it would be very interesting to know now, what's the interpretation of this part of the dream? Daniel says, and in the days of these kings, which kings? Not Nebuchadnezzar, he died 3,000 or so years ago, right? In the days of whose kings? What kings? Not Alexander the Great, not Augustus Caesar, but most probably in the days of these kings that are forming this united kind of kingdom. In the days of these kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed. And the kingdom shall not be left to other people. You can now see Babylon was conquered by Medo-Persia, and Daniel himself, he served both in Babylon and then in Medo-Persia. So we can say treasuries or laws or territories or other legacies have been transferred from one kingdom to another. But this one will not be left for some others. It even says it will crush all those kingdoms and bring them to an end, but it will itself endure forever. Please, we are looking for a kingdom never to be conquered by another, never to be followed by another, crushing all the others and lasting forever. I'm not saying which kingdom or what kingdom is that, but just highlighting these four features of the kingdom to come, never conquered by another, never followed by another, crushing all the others and lasting forever. Just to recapitulate here, we have the head of gold, Babylon. We have the arms and chest of silver, that's Medo-Persia. Then the thighs and belly of bronze, that is Greece. We have the legs of iron, which is Rome. And then the feet of iron and clay, which is Rome still, but suffering or going through a transformation. It's losing its iron strength, and there comes something weak into it. And then we have that stone which comes and crushes it all in. A kingdom, once again, never conquered, never followed by another, destroying everyone else, but still lasting forever. Now the lesson says, please think about the predictions we have just read. How could Daniel, a Hebrew living in the time of Babylon, have any idea of how empires would succeed each other hundreds of years into the future? Come on, we have a hard time figuring out tomorrow's weather or the stock market closing for the next week, right? And yet Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome followed each other exactly as predicted, as any world history textbook demonstrates today. So then, two key questions. Is God in control of the future? Of course. Can we have hope on the basis of this great plan or his great plan? I think these are rhetorical questions. But just coming back now to this guy. You remember? He went to the opera. He saw a nice play there with the poor guy becoming the ruler of an empire. And he said to his friend, I will be that guy. You'll hear about me. And the lesson says that 30 years later, after that thing, the two guys met again. And Hitler said to his friend, you remember that night? That's when it all started. Now, the lesson, as I said, Hitler probably never studied the prophecy of Daniel 2. If he had, he might have realized that his obsession with world dominance could never become a reality. How come? May I come now in closing this lesson with another story. It's not in the lesson, it's just my contribution to our lesson. So even if you went through the real lesson, you'll get something new tonight. There is this book entitled 1,000 Shall Fall. Is the story of a Christian, a Seventh-day Adventist Christian living in Germany in the time of Nazi regime by the name of Franz Hassel. You see him on the right side, young gentleman being drafted for the war. And now the story goes something like this. He goes to war along with so many others on the East Front. And at one point in time, he talks with his superior, with the lieutenant. And the lieutenant said to him, the Führer is my God. My trust rests in him. How would a Christian really respond to this guy, right? Or how would a Christian like you tonight, knowing Daniel 2? So Franz Hassel said to him, sir, Hitler is human like you and me. And one day he will die like you and me. And when he is dead, you won't have a God anymore. Now, I think it's a hard kind of a dialogue to have with the lieutenant in the Nazi army. If you know anything about this guy on the screen, he was a very impressive type of a guy who would mesmerize multitudes. For example, on a Christmas Eve, he would go to radio and he will say something like this. all is well. The Third Reich, this would be the third empire, kingdom in their view, German view of history. The Third Reich will soon be established. Germany will reign supreme for 1,000 years. Now, please, if you are just reading Daniel 2, would you say to him, oh, yes, of course. No. The greatest empires, they did not last more than several centuries. But Hitler had this idea in mind that his empire will reign for 1,000 years. These are not words made up by somebody. These have been mentioned by him on radio on Christmas Eve during one of the years of the World War II. So you can imagine all kinds of discussions Franz Hassel had there with his superiors or colleagues. There was a time when he had with them a Zoom Bible study like we have. No, it is not a Zoom, but he had a Bible study with them in one of the barracks there. And the lesson says that, the book says, he carefully went through the chapter Daniel, verse by verse, discussing exactly what we presented tonight, the empires of Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome. After 3.5 hours, I know I'm stuck on to only 45 minutes, but after 3.5 hours, he turned to the Hauptmann and said, do I have everything correct? He asked. As I said, I'm not an expert in history. I'd be grateful to you if you could point out any errors. Hauptmann was the guy very, very smart and trained in history also. No, the astonished officer replied, no errors. Everything is accurate. He gazed at the sergeant, the lieutenant, then back to Franz and said, Hassel, I have never heard anything so amazing in my life. Guess what happens after such discussion? The Hauptmann was quiet for a moment. Well, he finally asked, what does it mean? And I'm challenging you also. All right, we read this kind of prophecy or lesson, but then go to the meanings. What does it mean? Franz Hassel took a careful breath and prayed for courage as he did so. Herr Hauptmann, he said, the only conclusion a Bible student can come to is that the Führer cannot win this war. It will not be possible for him to unite Europe under his leadership and establish his 1,000-year Third Reich. I'm just stopping here. Would you say something like this to your superior? They are all German officers, and you tell them, come on, the Führer cannot win. You'll be a traitor, right? They'll shot you right away. He looked earnestly into the Hauptmann's face. Sir, the Bible predictions have been proved accurate again and again. And if they are accurate here, it means that we are fighting a losing battle. And then it was a dead silence. Please, once again, you're in the war and you're telling your superiors that you are going to fight a losing battle. At another time, another point in time, another superior came to him and said, Hassel, is it true that you talked to my officers for 4 hours about the end of the world? Yes, sir, I did. How dare you say such things? Sir, you know perfectly well that Hitler is establishing the Third Reich. That Reich would last 1,000 years. There is not going to be an end of the world or an end to the world. What was his answer? Hassel said, Hitler will never be able to unite the world under German rule, because that is not in harmony with Bible prophecy. The next event, sir, will be the rock that will smash the statue, and that will mark the end of our world. Then God will set up his own kingdom. There was, or they reached that point where the officers really listened to Hassel. I appreciate what you shared with me, said one of them. He looked around and lowered his voice. It was like whispering. From now on, we will no longer operate a third of our motorized vehicles. The gasoline rations thus saved, I want you to store in drums and canisters so that when the end of war comes, we will have enough fuel to get back home. Can you see what this officer did? He said, Hassel, you are right. And if you are right, we will lose this battle. Do we have to take any measures now? So when this end will come, we can save our lives. And they did. There came that day when Daily Mail and so many other newspapers had this headline, Hitler dead. Where was that Third Reich? 1,000 years and so on. Adolf Hitler is dead. And the newspaper says, news the world's been praying for. This was Franz Hassel. As a soldier, as a man of God, he came back. Here is with his wife and 3 kids, and the kid on the right was later Professor Gerhard Hassel, professor of theology. And Gerhard Hassel had a son by the name Michael Hassel, who was here in Dublin with Mark Finlay several years ago. Guys, what I'm presenting, ladies and gentlemen, friends, brothers, sisters, what I'm presenting to you here, it's a real history. It's not some, a fairy tale. Franz Hassel on the left survived, and his son and his grandson were both theology teachers, presenting the same stuff that I presented to you tonight. Why? Because they believed the prophecy in Daniel 2. This timeline of the world empires. Once again, this is the book. You find it in many languages. It has been translated in different languages. 1,000 shall fall. Please buy it. It's, I don't know, 7, 6, 10 euros. I don't know, but it will just make you a nice evening or 2 or 3 evenings if you read it in stages. But it's such a good book, a real story based also on what we just presented tonight. I'm ending with what is really that 5th empire? It was not a Third Reich, is not European Union, is not NATO allies. It's nothing in here. We believe it is a kingdom that God set, a kingdom that shall stand forever. In the Bible, it is called the kingdom of Christ. Now, my last slide is this one. In Ireland, whether it's in Dublin or on the south coast, west coast, somewhere Midland, everywhere you find a team from Discover Truth, you will see we have this banner. And on this banner, we have the story of Daniel 2. In the middle is one explaining to one guy in the street what this is really about. And it's like Daniel with Nebuchadnezzar 2,600 years ago or something like that. It's like Hassel explaining to his officers. It's like myself explaining to you tonight. Please take your time, read this chapter, Daniel 2. If possible, please note the link below these pictures. The final countdown, it's a flyer that we share everywhere. And it's an article on our website explaining this prophecy and giving you many, many details, even historical details in there that you can check them for yourself from encyclopedias, history books. Please know that prophecy has been confirmed by history. Everything past has been confirmed. What is to come? We hope and we trust it will also be confirmed. Thank you very much. I will end the sharing here, and I will also stop the recording now. And please, let's have now a session of Q&A or feedback or any type of confirmation or whatever you think it fits here. Thank you.